Right now, Ukrainian defense industries are tearing the Kremlin to pieces. They've unveiled cutting-edge developments that no one else has. This is even more impressive than HIMARS. The new weapons of the Ukrainian armed forces are making life hell for the Russians. The conveyor of retribution has been set in motion. This is only the beginning of a catastrophe for Russia. The Kremlin is in a stupor. Washington has shown who's boss here. Russia is ignoring negotiations. The US is settling everything by force. A tomahawk for Ukraine is already on its way. Putin is counting the minutes. NATO is on the brink of a nuclear standoff with Russia. It's extreme. Tensions are off the charts. The missiles are already primed for launch. But the alliance has a solution. Don't miss it. All the details coming soon. The EU delivers a powerful blow. Every euro and every missile is a kick in Putin's back. Europe is turning its aid to Ukraine into a true catalyst for victory. The continent is uniting against Russia. Ukraine is getting everything. For the Ukrainian armed forces, nothing is impossible. Even the enemy's weapons with artificial intelligence can't withstand such pressure and ends up as scrap metal. Now that's a twist. Ukraine is taking over the European arms market and its budget is growing. No one has ever done anything like this before. Coming up in our program, Hot Bomb. Ukrainian engineers are breaking all the molds. New developments are turning life in the Kremlin into a real nightmare. And this is just the start of a powerful breakthrough. Power decides everything. What drives Ukraine's military-industrial complex today, and how it's changing the rules of the game. In our report? Mass production of strike and reconnaissance drones, naval unmanned vehicles, artillery, and missiles. All of this has transformed Ukraine from an arms importer into a full-fledged producer of modern weaponry.
Ukraine is launching serial production of its first ballistic missile in...
Ukraine is developing a universal missile system based on the HIMARS principle.
Ukraine has started mass production of Octopus interceptor drones.
A Ukrainian company has developed ground-based robotic systems with electronic warfare modules.
The Ukrainian defense industry has made a leap that just a few years ago seemed impossible.
Since 2022, Ukraine has demonstrated such a high level of creativity and ingenuity that no partner country had ever expected from us before. We have shown just how inventive and creative we can be. Questions of dominance at sea are being resolved without having their own fleet or flotilla, but by achieving full control of the Black Sea through maritime drones.
Today, long-range capability has become a priority, as have drones of various types, bases, and the defense industry. This is exactly what Ukraine is betting on.
110 billion for drones. Ukraine has tripled its production.
It is precisely through drones that Ukraine compensates for the shortage of missiles and achieves parity with Russia in the air.
As a matter of fact, for now, drones have become the most prevalent and primary means of delivering precision strikes, even when considering the broader context of long-range capabilities. That is, long-range drones, long-range strike drones, they remain dominant. And drawing a direct comparison between these systems and missiles, or indeed any other conventional means of attack, is, for now, not considered entirely fair, nor is it particularly accurate. However, once we finally achieve the milestone of mass and serial production of missile weaponry, of course, the strategic situation will undergo a significant change. And
this is a key change in the war. Russia no longer has a technological monopoly, not even in the air. And again, we shouldn't forget about the sea, which Ukraine can control even without a navy. And it's all thanks to maritime unmanned systems.
The use of Magura has inflicted over $500 million in losses on the Russian fleet, according to estimates by Ukrainian intelligence. Together with other platforms, particularly Sea Baby, this has systematically complicated the enemy's presence and basing in the Black Sea. On December 20th, 2025, Ukraine and Portugal signed a joint statement on partnership in the production of maritime drones. And
this is another significant change. Today, partners are not just transferring weapons, but are entering into joint production.
Ukraine and Portugal have agreed on joint production of maritime drones.
The largest defense company in the Czech Republic is launching ammunition production in Ukraine.
Ukraine and Britain will launch the production of interceptor drones to combat Shaheds.
But let's get back to long-range capabilities. Drones are not the only argument in this matter. A separate area is the missile program. We're talking, of course, about the well-known Neptune, which, after modernization, transformed from an anti-ship system that sank the cruiser Moskva into a long-range missile for striking ground targets.
I think this was one of those presentations we've been waiting for so long, the long-range Neptune. And this is, after all, a more high-tech missile, which is used with precision, almost surgically.
But Ukraine's missile arsenal is much broader, and as the president of Ukraine said, as of December 2025, it is being actively used.
To be frank, Ukraine is already using cruise missiles today. Neptunes, long-range Neptunes, Polynicia, Flamingo, as well as Sapsan. To be honest, we've started.
This is Ukraine's long arm. There is little talk about such systems, but their presence changes the enemy's calculations. Less publicity, more results. There are also results in the production of mortar and artillery munitions. But it's not just about ammunition.
Today, Ukraine produces more Tu-S-22 Bodana self-propelled artillery units per year than the French company Nexter, which manufactures the Caesar self-propelled howitzer. These are among the first wheeled self-propelled artillery units that we received from our... And in order to successfully bring this entire process to a complete and definitive stop, you must ensure that every single component is properly deactivated and that all remaining operations are fully concluded before you proceed any further with the next steps of the sequence.
Or even slow down, the Ukrainian defense industry has no intention. That's why Ukraine, together with its partners, will continue to develop defense projects.
Ukraine and Poland will jointly modernize the MiG-29, which will be provided by the Polish side. A range of drones, air defense and aviation. Ukraine is deepening its defense cooperation with the Netherlands. France has announced the deepening of cooperation with Ukraine in the field of drones.
In addition, Ukraine's Minister of Defense, Mikhailo Fedorov, is announcing new developments. For example, a Ukrainian counterpart to reconnaissance drones like the DJI Mavic and the Russian Molnia. And of course, as part of strengthening its defense capabilities, the Ministry of Defense continues to digitize the front and is implementing a new drone management system. These are not isolated experiments, but systematic work by the defense industry. During the full-scale war, the Ukrainian military-industrial complex has learned the most important thing: to respond quickly to challenges on the battlefield.
Every single year, Ukraine continues to surprise the world with impressive new inventions and innovations. And in a very real sense, it is fundamentally reshaping the established rules of war, not only the war currently unfolding in Ukraine, but also the rules of modern warfare in general, on a truly global and international scale.
The Ukrainian defense industry is no longer just surviving, it is developing. The defense sector has become systematic, technological, and large-scale. This means one thing. Ukraine enters any negotiations not empty-handed, but with weapons it is capable of producing itself. The US is urgently preparing a devastating blow against Putin. Russia is ignoring negotiations, which means the language of force decides everything. The Tomahawk is already speeding toward Ukraine. The decision has been made. Senator Lindsey Graham is keeping his finger on the pulse. Will Ukraine receive the weapons that will tip the balance of power? All the details are in our report.
American Republican Senator Lindsey Graham has called on Trump to finally send Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine.
After last night's massive attack, I am urging President Trump to begin the process of supplying Ukraine Tomahawk missiles, which will be a game-changer militarily. In the coming days and weeks, we must increase the pressure on Putin. Any negotiations that are seen as excessively rewarding aggression will lead to disasters around the world.
Well, obviously this is being coordinated directly by the White House, but the well-known Lindsey Graham has published a lengthy post with an appeal to provide Ukraine with Tomahawks. This doesn't mean that Tomahawks will actually be provided, but it's one way to show that Washington is dissatisfied.
Of course, from across the border, they're constantly crowing that Tomahawks will lead to a new escalation, and everything along those lines.
Can Tomahawks cause us damage? They can. We will shoot them down, we will improve our system. Will this harm our own? Our relations, in which there seemed to be some light at the end of the tunnel, of course, it will harm them. Well, how could it not? It's impossible to use Tomahawks without the direct involvement of American military personnel. This would mean an absolutely new, qualitatively new stage of escalation, including in relations between Russia and the United States.
I don't think that we already are dealing with a final decision. The Americans don't supply Tomahawks to just anyone. If they believe that Ukraine is a responsible state that will use them responsibly, that would be surprising to me.
Naturally, all of this is empty talk, and American missiles really could help finally push Putin toward peace.
They have never once taken the issue of ensuring peace or making any steps toward it seriously. None of it was genuine. It was all pretended. But if Trump really did provide missiles in significant numbers, the same Tomahawks just like a number of European allies, and if they were used to strike Moscow at once, I assure you it would be a completely different conversation.
At the same time, Trump himself is constantly wavering, from statements that he will soon provide Tomahawks to a categorical no.
Yes, I've almost made a decision already if you think about it. I want to know what they're going to do with them, where they'll send them. I think I'll have to ask that question. We'll see, but at the same time, I don't want an escalation. We need Tomahawks for the United States as well. We have a lot of them, but we need them. I mean, we can't deplete our own country's stockpiles. They are very powerful, important, they're very good, but they're also important for us.
But perhaps, for example, the shelling of Ukraine's energy infrastructure and abnormal frosts will influence the US president, right at the moment when he was announcing agreements with Putin.
But how did he set himself up? How did Putin set him up? He makes a statement, and at that very moment, missiles strike. This is a complete setup. But he, the president of the greatest country in the world, says, I reached an agreement, and he's basically being spat in the face. He looks like a total loser right now. When he makes such statements, it's like they're spitting right at him. That's why there's hope that the next move will be directed specifically against the Russians.
Be that as it may, according to experts, in the past even threats, not the actual fact of deliveries, had an effect on Russia.
As last year's experience showed, as soon as the United States merely mentioned Tomahawk missiles, Putin immediately began to demonstrate the highest level of constructiveness, or rather, constructive behavior, in every possible way, trying to show that he wants peace. If the United States had clearly stated that in the event Russia destroyed Ukraine's energy infrastructure, Ukraine would receive MCAF missiles, I guarantee that nothing like what is happening now would have occurred.
Whether it will work this time is still unclear. But it is quite likely that the threats, just like with the sanctions against Lukoil and Russian oil, could very soon turn into action.
A full-scale NATO war against Russia is closer than it seems. Norway is sounding the alarm and preparing for the worst. Russia is having a nuclear tantrum, tensions are off the charts, and Britain is already training to fight against Putin's army in a town that simulates a conflict zone in Ukraine. How is NATO preparing for a global confrontation with Russia? Find out right now.
The arms race is beginning. Trump is getting ready to deploy new warheads and conduct nuclear tests. We're talking about various scenarios for expanding the arsenal by using stored munitions, according to the New York Times. The very last full-scale underground nuclear explosion, conducted by the United States government in Washington, D.C., took place back in the year 1992. If the number of deployed nuclear warheads increases, Trump will become the first U.S. president since Ronald Reagan to expand the nuclear arsenal. It is noted that for about 40 years, the United States has either reduced or maintained the number of deployed weapons at the same level.
The United States is the world's leading economy, so its capabilities for modernizing its nuclear potential at any given moment are many times greater than those of the Russian Federation, which is currently considered a rival to the United States. Accordingly, the proactive strategic measures of the Trump administration are concentrated predominantly on enhancing the United States' overall domestic capacity to successfully manufacture, maintain, and effectively deliver nuclear warheads.
The Trump administration stated that they would continue nuclear arsenal modernization programs, including new silos, submarines, and bombers. They also mentioned the possibility of deploying unused nuclear weapons from storage.
Under New START, the number was limited of warheads to 1,550, and some of them, accordingly, were to be disposed of, but was removed from active deployment and placed in long-term storage facilities. The number of nuclear warheads kept in long-term storage facilities will be the first to be used in the modernization program.
One of the priorities is expanding the capabilities of the Ohio-class submarines, each of which has 24 missile silos for nuclear warheads. To comply with the limits, previously 4 silos on each submarine were deactivated. Now there are plans to restore them, which will allow for the additional loading of hundreds of warheads. There is also discussion about deploying tactical nuclear weapons, which Russia is actively stationing. All these steps may be aimed both at strengthening the US nuclear potential and at encouraging Russia and China to engage in new arms limitation talks.
This program envisions capital investment over the next 10 years, not only in modernizing the existing nuclear arsenal, but also primarily in increasing delivery systems. In other words, the capability for an adequate response against legitimate military targets on the territory of the PRC and the Russian Federation.
Let us recall that on February 5th, the last major nuclear arms control agreement between the US and Russia expired. This agreement had been signed more than 15 years ago, during a period of warming relations between the Kremlin and the White House. Formally, its validity ended back in 2021. However, at that time, Vladimir Putin and then US President Joe Biden, contrary to the concerns of many analysts, they made use of the option to extend the treaty once for 5 years. So now, the termination of the agreement means that each of the signatory states can now produce nuclear weapons, as many as it deems necessary.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Europe is urgently covering Ukraine with a wave of aid. The Kremlin is in shock. Sweden is preparing a super powerful support package. Cruise missiles are already on the horizon. Military, political and financial support is off the charts. Europe is doing everything to crush Russian aggression once and for all. For details on how the continent is tearing up the Kremlin's plans, stay tuned.
The supply of air defense systems, F-16S and HIMARS missiles became the main topics during negotiations between the new defense minister Mikhailo Fedorov and NATO representatives. The Ukrainian official thanked the bloc's representatives for their ongoing military support and for supplying air defense ammunition under the Pearl Initiative.
The key priority right now is protecting the skies, and for this, Ukraine is transforming its short-range air defense system. The parties agreed on the main priorities for cooperation, strengthening air defense, development, Patriot, F-16s and HIMARS, as well as joint work on technological superiority. Ukraine shares with its partners unique combat experience, real data from the battlefield, and technological solutions that are already in use.
A separate track is the coordination of Ramstein together with Germany and the United Kingdom in order to accelerate decision-making and the delivery of necessary aid to Ukraine. A meeting in this format will take place as soon as February 12th at NATO headquarters. Sweden is preparing one of the largest military aid packages for Ukraine. Swedish Defense Minister Paul Jonsson stated that very soon his country may also provide Ukraine with Gripen fighter jets and long-range Meteor missiles.
The Swedish side is preparing a large-scale aid package, which will include air defense systems and radars produced by Saab, as well as investments in the Ukrainian defense industry, additional electronic warfare systems and drones, including deep strike.
Ukraine has long been interested in Swedish fighter jets and the missiles for them. Back in 2023, Sweden granted permission for Ukrainian pilots to be trained on these fighter jets. After that, the Swedish parliament supported the delivery of aircraft to Ukraine, so the delivery of Gripen jets and long-range Meteor missiles is only a matter of time. Ukraine is considering the option of launching joint production in the defense tech sector with defense industry facilities located in Sweden. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz stated that Ukraine can continue to count on comprehensive assistance from Germany. The shelling of Ukraine's energy infrastructure are acts of war, crimes committed by Russia. And Germany will try to purchase the maximum number of air defense missiles to protect Ukraine.
We will try to procure air defense systems around the world, and Ukraine will receive them. A significant portion of the purchases is being made through Germany and the European consortium. We see that Ukraine is now capable of creating its own long-range missile defense systems, which surpass some of those that we in Europe have offered and discussed in previous years.
In addition to ongoing military assistance, partners are also supporting Ukraine in the negotiation track. For example, the head of European diplomacy, Kaja Kallas, stated that over the past 100 years, Russia has attacked at least 19 countries, and some of them 3 or 4 times. At the same time, not a single one of these countries has ever attacked Russia. The key in negotiations is to maintain constant pressure on the Russian Federation and force the aggressor to make concessions.
We need concessions from the other side. For Russia, this means restrictions on their military budget, army or nuclear weapons, as well as holding them accountable for the crimes they have committed. In
the Czech Republic, $6 million were raised for Ukraine in just 5 days. The money will go toward purchasing generators, heaters, and batteries. On
the weekend, we ordered 2 diesel generators, which are being delivered by truck. Each one cost 8 million crowns. They will be given to 2 small medical facilities.
To help the freezing residents of Kiev, a Polish charity fundraiser collected over $2 million during the energy crisis. More than 58,000 people made donations to the campaign. Military and energy assistance from European partners, as well as diplomatic pressure on the Russian Federation, make it possible to hope not only for getting through this difficult winter, but also for the Kremlin to accept a peace plan on the terms of the civilized world and Ukraine in particular.
Breaking news. For the first time, the Ukrainian armed forces have destroyed Russia's newest AI-powered drone, the Kremlin. Ballistics at launch and sends regards to the Crimean Bridge. But that's far from all the bad news for the enemy. Mass evacuation in Russia. The Ukrainian armed forces have destroyed Russia's strategic weapons arsenal. Komi is on fire. A powerful strike of retribution 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine. The Lukoil Ukhta oil refinery is in ruins. Iron birds mercilessly tear apart the Kremlin's oil veins. All the details, watch in our report. A new round of shelling by the Ukrainian armed forces. More than 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine, the Lukoil Ukhta oil refinery was attacked. Drones also attacked the Tambov and Volgograd regions. It was loud in the Tambov region in Michurinsk. There is a plant there that produces aircraft equipment and missiles called Progress. The likely target in the Volgograd region was an artillery ammunition depot near the village of Kotluban.
Ukrainian Defense Forces drones are striking legitimate military targets on the territory of the occupier's country. In particular, on the night of February 12th, Ukrainian Defense Forces drones struck the arsenal of the main artillery directorate of the occupier country's army near the village of Kotluban in the Volgograd region.
The target for the Ukrainian Flamingos is temporarily occupied Crimea. Ukraine continues to ramp up production of a long-range cruise missile capable of flying up to 3,000 kilometers and reaching even Siberia.
These are the deployment sites. The Russian Aerospace Forces aircraft Saki-Jankoy airfields. In addition, legitimate military targets for the Ukrainian side on the territory of occupied Crimea also include logistical facilities such as the Crimean Bridge, as well as energy and fuel infrastructure sites. These will become priority targets for the Ukrainian side when striking temporarily occupied territories of the Ukrainian peninsula. In
January, the losses of Russian occupation forces on the battlefield in Ukraine exceeded the Kremlin's ability to replenish its personnel by 9,000 people. This was reported by Bloomberg, citing Western officials. Since the start of Wednesday, February 11th, there have been 113 combat engagements on the front, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The Russians are most active in the Pokrovsk and Huliaipol directions.
At the moment in the Pokrovsk direction. The occupiers are trying to advance further directly towards Pokrovsk itself. The enemy is using the tactic of infiltrating small assault groups supported by drone systems.
Fighters of the 118th Separate Mechanized Brigade eliminated a rare enemy UAV using interceptor drones. A rare enemy UAV, the Lachlan, equipped with artificial intelligence. Only 4 months have passed since this device was introduced in Ariak, but Ukrainian defenders have already found ways to neutralize it.
Now that's a twist. Exporting weapons instead of capitulation. Europe is opening its doors. The Kremlin's demilitarization has failed spectacularly. Ukraine is entering new markets with its powerful innovations. How will the export of cutting-edge technologies affect Ukraine's defense industry and budget? And why is this needed now more than ever? Right now, for Europe? We'll tell you more about this in the following report.
A historic step for Ukraine. As President Volodymyr Zelensky stated, during 2026, 10 export centers will begin operating in European countries, focusing on promoting and producing Ukrainian technologies. Ukraine is opening up the export of its defense products. The president also revealed some details about the geography of this cooperation.
Today we are opening up exports. It's very reassuring that exports are being opened. There will already be 10 export centers in Europe by 2026. This includes Germany, the Baltic states, and the Nordic countries.
That is 10 representative offices. In 2026, they will be operating in Germany, and by mid-February, we will already see the production of our drones in Germany. I will receive the first drone. There is also a production line operating in Britain. The production lines are up and running. All of these are our Ukrainian technologies.
Now, Ukraine is essentially entering the global technological race. And this is not only about developing its own defense industry, but also about increasing the sales of its technologies worldwide. even though the country has been at war for more than 10 years.
Certain products that are currently being supplied to the Ukrainian military in sufficient quantities and are not in short supply are in extremely high demand. And the surplus will be exported specifically to stimulate domestic production. This idea has been in the making for quite some time. And it doesn't just concern, for example, drones, a large number of which are produced in Ukraine. There are various specific and specialized categories of other weaponry, as well as essential pieces of technical equipment that are simply not in such consistently high levels of urgent demand within the annual defense orders received from the Ministry of Defense and other similar governmental agencies.
The export of weapons will help Ukraine cover the funding shortfall for new production. It will also help increase the country's budget. Ukrainian manufacturers have been waiting for this for a long time as their capacities were idle due to a lack of funding. And there has long been demand for Ukrainian developments around the world. At the same time, not so long ago, the very idea of exporting Ukrainian weapons or technologies seemed unthinkable. After all, the Ukrainian defense industry was deliberately destroyed.
Over these 4 years of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, our military-industrial complex has developed significantly beyond the levels seen in the previous decade. And this is very important because, in fact, from the very beginning of the modern stage of Ukraine's independence, our defense industry received little attention. Not just little attention, it was ignored, sold off, and dismantled. Practically during every single term of every president, starting with Kravchuk, then Kuchma, and so on, there was a complete and systematic degradation and a total destruction of our entire national defense industry, especially under Yanukovych. It reached its peak then. During the administration of Yanukovych, Ukraine's entire military-industrial complex was deliberately and systematically destroyed. And it was only starting from the year 2014 that the world finally began to see a slow and gradual revival alongside the systematic implementation of those ambitious development projects that had originally been considered highly relevant many decades ago. For example, the same Neptune anti-ship missile system, which at one time sank the missile cruiser Moskva. It prevented the capture of Odessa and the Odessa region.
But, as the president of Ukraine noted, Ukrainian facilities in Germany are expected to be launched in the coming days. This will not only allow Ukraine to earn revenue, but will also help protect Europe from military aggression. After all, modern European security is impossible without Ukrainian expertise.
Today's security relations in Europe are based on our technologies and drones. That is, those who won the dome and so on. Protection Waves drones are talking about us. There are several different projects in Europe. All of this will be based mostly on Ukrainian technologies and Ukrainian specialists.
Ukrainian developments in the field of unmanned systems are becoming the foundation for Europe's defense, and there is a logical explanation for this.
The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, is saying completely obvious things that are well understood even in Europe itself. They do not possess it. They do not have the knowledge base and experience that, for example, Ukraine has when it comes to countering a country like the Russian Federation. And for instance, the incursion of 19 foam-based Herbir drones into the airspace of Poland at one time showed that the Polish air defense system was absolutely unprepared for such incursions. If these types of intensive aerial raids were to continue to occur every single night, the entire Polish air defense system would find itself completely exhausted and worn out in less than a month. To put it quite simply and directly, Europe is currently not adequately prepared for a full-scale military conflict with the Russian Federation. They do not yet fully comprehend all the complex strategic and logistical aspects necessary to realize exactly which tools and resources need to be utilized for a more effective counteraction against the growing Russian threat. And Ukraine, of course, given its extensive first-hand experience in this case, can provide invaluable assistance and guidance to help Europe navigate these challenges, both technically, technologically, and with its experience.
Putin has repeatedly said that he wants the demilitarization of Ukraine. This point was one of the reasons why Putin attacked Ukraine. But once again, things did not go according to his plan. And now Ukrainian technologies are in demand not only in Europe, but all over the world. That's all for now. For more hot news, tune into the next episode.